Well, I'd like to thank everybody for your questions on Facebook and Twitter, and we actually got some great ones, and I wanted to get to three or four of them today. First of all, Darren asked, as a coach, how do you emphasize to your players the importance of education and not just putting everything into one basket and making it in the NFL? And I know that's something I've always talked about, whether I'm talking to high school kids, college kids, or even NFL players. Education is so important. Football may seem like it's the most important thing in the world as you're chasing that dream, but we all have to understand that at some point it's going to end. It ends for a lot of young men when they're 21 years old and they graduate from college. Only 1% of them go into the NFL and play. But even if you're one of that lucky 1%, it's going to end for you at 24, 26. If you're very, very lucky, maybe 31 or 32. But you've got years to look forward to. And that's what I always try to talk to my players about. What's your life's dream? What's your life's goal? What do you want to do when you get done with football? Whether that's next year, 2 years from now, 10 years from now, there's going to come a time when you've got to adjust and go back into the real world. And your education is going to be so important then. Sean asks, if you were coaching your son's team, how do you find the balance of being their coach and their dad? And I can say this is always one of the toughest situations. I never coached my son in anything, any of my boys, maybe in the backyard and that type of thing. But actually coaching on the team is rough because you do have two different jobs. You're always going to be dad, but you have to put that aside for the time that you're on the field or on the court, and you have to become the coach, and you've got to treat it that way. But then you've got to make sure you go back to being dad. And don't always be the coach, even when you're at home, when you're on the way to practice, when you're on the way to the games, then you're the dad. So if you are in that situation, make sure you separate it. Do your job as the coach them just like everybody else during that time you're on the field, but make sure you don't forget that in the other 22 hours of the day, you're his dad. John asks, what is something you've learned as a father that you feel is the most valuable piece of information you can share? And I would say this, I learned it from my dad, and I see it with my kids. Every one of your children is different, and you can't treat them all the same way. You have to look at what's going to be best for them. Chuck Noll told me as a coach a long time ago when I first started coaching, your job is to help every player be the best that you can be. I think it's the same thing as a dad. You're trying to help every one of your kids be the absolute best they can be. So it's not necessarily just one way of doing things. Well, this is how I coach. This is how I parent. How can I help this son? How can I help this daughter? What do they need specifically? And it may be a little different. Coach Noll used to say, fair is not always equal. And I think that's one thing I learned. I want to treat my kids fairly. That doesn't necessarily mean treating them all the same.